Chapter 14. J. By the time we got to Brown Town, the principal and the caretaker had joined the other kids. We stumbled forward, stopping just on the outside of the small circle of people. Now it was obvious why they were there. The walls of the school, the concrete, and the benches were all covered with orange spray paint. There were crude letters, quickly drawn words. Over the bike racks it read, "Camel Parking." 2 of the benches had the words, "Sand Monkey Seating," on them. There were other words I couldn't read, and there was something all over the concrete, all over the ground, sort of pink confetti or ribbons or... "Is that ham?" Steve asked. He looked stunned. "Yes, it is," Mr. Atkins said. "But why would anybody throw ham around?" I questioned. "Pork is the most impure meat," Moose said. "It's an insult against Muslims, just like the words." But who would do this?" I stammered. I looked up at the others. One of them was Haroun, the one who'd been handcuffed by mistake. "We have no idea. We're hoping somebody will come forward with some information," Mr. Atkins said. "We weren't even here," Steve protested. "We were at the football game against Streetsville. We won the game. Right, Moose?" Steve sounded guilty, speaking up like that. "Yeah, we won," Moose agreed. "Somebody will know," our principal said. "This isn't the work of just one person, so it won't stay a secret." "Don't you have a camera aimed at this area?" I asked, looking around for one. "None here, but we'll find out." I heard the roar of an engine and looked up expecting to see Kevin's car. Instead, a news truck squealed to a halt. "How did they find out?" "Nothing stays a secret," Miss Singh, one of the teachers, said. There was more than a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "We don't need any more bad publicity," Mr. Atkins said. He turned to the police officers. "Can you keep them away for a few minutes?" One of the officers had stripes on his epaulets. A sergeant. "A couple of minutes. Why?" "I was just hoping we could clean it up a little before they start taking pictures. We can clean it up now, right?" "We have our evidence," the sergeant said. The other officer held up a camera. "Good. Thanks. If you can just get us a few minutes, we'd really appreciate it. We don't want this thing blown out of proportion." "Neither do we," the sergeant said. "The less publicity this generates, the better." They went over to intercept the 2 men who had gotten out of the news truck. "Could everybody please gather around?" our principal said. We all moved a little bit closer, but nobody seemed to want to get too close. "The arrest of one of our students has caused a great deal of suffering here at the school," he said. "Not to mention the suffering it has caused the student and his family," Miss Singh said. He looked at her, furrowed his brow slightly, and then continued. "The last thing we need is publicity." "Are you suggesting keeping the press out?" Miss Singh asked angrily. "Freedom of the press is one of the foundations of democracy." Mr. Atkins glowered at her. "Thank you for the grade 9 civics lesson, Miss Singh," he snapped. "I am suggesting that this message of hatred and intolerance can only lead to further hatred and intolerance, inflaming emotions and actions on both sides. There is no need for the world to see these words. They need to see the actions of our students and staff to fix what has been done. Does anybody disagree?" he demanded. I assumed it was a rhetorical question. Adults always ask questions they don't want answered. "Raise your hand if you'd like to do something about this." There seemed no choice but to raise our hands, which we all did. "Excellent. Right here, right now, we're going to work as a team to clean this mess up. If the media has to see these words, they are also going to see our students working together to erase these words." "I'll help for sure," Steve said, "but I'm a little worried about Moose here. He's not feeling well. Kevin's going to drive him home." He gestured and we all turned around. Kevin, along with the 2 news people, was standing behind the 2 officers who blocked them from moving closer. "I'm okay," Moose said. "You look awful," Miss Singh said. "Are you fasting and playing football?" That was the last thing we wanted anybody to ask. "I'm okay," he repeated, without either answering her question or lying. "Fine, Moose. Kevin can take you home. Can I count on the rest of you?" Mr. Atkins looked at us. Again, what choice did we have but to nod our heads in agreement? "Mr. Caldwell," the principal said, "let one of the students use the broom. Another can have the dustpan. Do you think the paint can be washed away with soapy water and a scrub brush?" "It's still fresh, some of it, depending on the type of paint." "And the words that can't be removed?" "Can be covered up with spray paint," Mr. Caldwell offered. "Excellent. If you could get those supplies, we will all get to work." Steve and I both used scrub brushes to try to remove the paint. It was hard work, and after a while I could feel it in my arms, but it seemed to be working. There were still bits of orange paint showing on the benches, but it was impossible to read the words. The concrete walls were bumpy and rough, and the paint had gotten itself into the bumps so much that it was almost impossible to get out. Mr. Caldwell used the gray spray paint to simply cover up the whole area. That worked well, although in some ways it just made for a nice clean canvas for the next set of people with the spray can. Hopefully that wouldn't be the case here. I looked slightly over my shoulder. The camera was aimed at the two of us. I looked away. I had been really aware of the camera for the first 10 or 15 minutes, and then my attention had sort of faded. The news guys had wanted to interview us about what had happened and what we were doing, but our principal wouldn't let them. He said that without our parents giving written permission, he couldn't allow that to take place on school property. Instead, they just shot the whole thing, the camera panning around. Steve stood up, turning around, and faced the camera with a big smile on his face. Steve had worked hard to make sure he was in a whole lot of the shots. "Hey, I know you," Steve said. I looked over. He was talking to Haroon. "You're a friend of Julian's," Steve added. The kid nodded. "Yes." "I'm Steve Morgan." "I know." "You do? Have we met?" The kid shrugged. "You're on the football team. Everybody knows the guys on the football team. I'm Haroon." "Good to meet you. Any friend of Julian's is a friend of mine." The two of them shook hands. "And since you know me, you must know Jay." I stood up and we shook hands. "I know you too," I said. "You're in my geography class, and I saw you on TV from the court." He looked surprised and then embarrassed. "Unfortunately, you weren't the only one. Julian thought it was a joke. My parents didn't think it was so funny. They really didn't like me being at court." "Why did you go?" Steve asked. "I guess we were just sort of curious. Plus, we wanted to show support for Azim." "So you knew him," Steve said. "Did the team win by a lot?" Haroon asked, abruptly changing the subject. Obviously he didn't want to talk about that anymore. "Yeah, easy win," I answered. "Why were you still here?" "Practice." "What team?" Volleyball would be starting up soon. "We're on the Reach for the Top team." "The what?" Steve asked. He'd mentioned that on the news. The terrorist kid was on it too. "Reach for the Top. Our school has a team in the contest. We give answers to questions. It's like a TV show." Yeah, I know that show," Steve said. "Do you watch it?" Haroon asked. He sounded hopeful. Steve shook his head. "Nope." "I didn't know we had a team like that," I said. "I don't think many people know. Azim was on the team. They arrested him during practice." "That would have been pretty exciting," Steve said. Not the word I'd use. I had to agree with him there. "I guess you're getting to be a real TV star," Steve said. "That Reach for the Top thing. You were on the news the other day, and we're definitely on tonight's news. Smile for the camera."